may seem to go unnoticed, right? And so what is this one thing that we may not think of, but it's actually being controlled, or the decisions of that are actually being taken by AI?
By AI, technically means by somebody else having the.
So yes, somebody else having that control. Yes.
So thank you guys. Thank you for having me here. I'll just give a single line of introduction. I am Harshvardhan Lunia, and I run a fintech finance and technology company. We are the largest SME digital lending platform in the country in India overall. We serve small and micro businesses, business loans, and help them grow their businesses. I think Rohan start question is apt, I guess, in the sense that we are not realizing a lot of things has been happening to us directly, indirectly. One of the things is, I don't know if you guys have noticed that whenever you go on Google, whenever you go on Amazon, whenever you go or search for anything, the next time you start seeing those ads on any digital platform you go. That's one. Secondly, I think when you go to any food delivery app, when you go to any Ola Uber app, like the travel apps in the country or anything else as well, or any OTT platforms, Netflix and everything, you start getting customized data from them for what you have been before. I'll give you a classic example where me and my wife one day were at the airport and had to book a cab for our home, and the price that was shown to me was 100 rupees higher, and the car was a larger one compared to the price that was shown to her, and a smaller car was available in her case, but not in my case, right? So overall, I think this is the kind of influence we are all seeing and having in our life, but that's all based on data, what we have feeded in our systems and our apps and everything.
This is super helpful. So day-to-day decisions that are being taken, as you pointed out, sort of taking an Uber based on the change of demography, the change of person, the app's ability or the backend infrastructure's ability to sort of customize the price of that based on that.
It's basically personalizing it, right? It's personalizing to my needs and requests.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mr. Adish, would you sort of give an example of what you?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. I hope everybody is awake after a wonderful lunch. Just to add to it, I think a very simple example is our emails. We haven't noticed it, or we have noticed it. If you have Outlook, you use Gmail. It's already filtered now. It shows your primary email, it shows your spam email, it shows you advertisements. A very simple example. So, not just the content which we see on YouTube, but also our communication is being filtered out for us, and we have till now been okay with it. We have never complained that who decides what comes in my primary email inbox. Nobody really has complained, right? So just a simple example.
This is again the ability to sort of organize information, and you being not responsible for that organization, and you sort of trusting it that this may come in my spam, or this has come in my spam, it must be spam, right? So that sort of evolution has definitely taken. Dr. Sabine, would you sort of talk about something in maybe the healthcare space, something where we've seen a shift in AI, or we're seeing decisions being taken by AI per se?
Well, thank you. As Harshad said, a little bit more on my intro. I have been living and breathing healthcare for 8 years, I believe. So, being a clinician myself, one thing that I think I have seen shift is not just the way information is structured and absorbed, but mostly the flow of work and our own jobs. So yes, one thing that done, and the selling part has been highly optimized, but what it has done is change the nature of our own jobs. When we start looking back at how we were doing our own jobs, say 10 years ago or 15 years ago, when you guys were kids back then, right? a job back then. But the point is, our jobs were very different. A lot of it was pen and paper. A lot of us were dependent on self-knowledge or knowledge of your peers around you. But that nature has completely changed, and that we can see very actively in healthcare. Today, to be very fair, I don't remember half of the nature of drugs. I Google most of it when I go to my PC because I don't need to, right? Every information that I need to retain is generally there available at my fingertips. What is not there is the contextualization of it. So that is where I come into play in taking the decisions. But within that healthcare system, I feel a huge shift in the nature of work happening because of uh, the access to the information that is there, the validity of that information, and the way that information is processed through AI systems and LLMs that are being built in extremely fast and contextualized manner. So, yeah.
I think, again, this is super insightful. Dr. Adit, would you sort of like to add in something into this in terms of what is it that is happening in the healthcare space that we as sort of consumers of healthcare may not realize is actually being done by automated systems, if not specifically AI, but by some level of automation at large?
So hi everyone, I'm Dr. Adit Desai, and like her, I've been living, breathing healthcare for the last 15 years. Something I feel AI or automated systems is very close to cracking is personalized health monitoring and lifestyle changes. So I think 80% of the room is wearing some kind of a smartwatch on their fists, right? And so I also wear one. I've been wearing one since the last 1 year, and it every day it tells me, "Hi, you didn't sleep well yesterday. Sleep for eight more hours today. Seems like you didn't work out yesterday. You walked 4,000 steps lesser than the same day last week." So these kind of suggestions we all of us are getting daily, right? And it's kind of motivating us, yes, but it's also sitting on our head every day, telling us what to do in a very subtle way, in a very trying to be very positive, right? But there's a very thin line between these AI systems assisting us and dictating us. So we need to be very careful of what all are we listening to these softwares. Are we blindly following them or not? It's good to have an assistant like this who's kind of nagging us every day, but all of us have to ask us individually till what point. So these two things, I think AI and automated systems is almost correct.
Absolutely. I think Apple run one of their campaigns with their wearable Apple Watch, and if you see one of the videos, they talked about all these, one of their ad campaigns, they talked about all these people's lives who were in danger all across the world. And they were like, Apple Watch was the savior because it indicated that there was some change in your pulse, there was some change in your ECG, EKG, all of those things. So although we might not be at a stage where we might fully depend on these AI systems, certainly I think they're sort of helping us with a lot of these supporting tasks that we're doing on a day-to-day basis. Mr. Shashi, would you sort of like to add on or chip in into what is it that one personal thing that's happening in your life that you may not realize is being sort of overtaken by AI?
Definitely. I think this is a very subtle change which is happening and maybe not obvious. All of you use apps, right? All of you use apps, whether it is an application, whether it is on a SaaS model or whatever might be the case. There is a very gradual shift, and you will realize that the shift is now this layer of application between data and between a user is going to disappear. And what that means is you will no way need to rely on an intermediate application to get jobs done. You will be able to talk to systems as long as you have access. And this is underway. You would see a lot of these examples of a specific application being replaced by a bot, and bot being replaced by an agent. Bot used to not think, agents have reasoning. And this has started happening. Tomorrow, whenever you will open up an app, you may not have an interface. You will just have a box like what you have in search today. And you can interact it by writing, by talking, by dancing in front of it if it has to be the case. And that is going to happen. So the layer of applications or SaaS or apps may disappear, or at least to a large extent will change. And if you are not feeling it, start noticing it and things will start happening. So that's what is happening in this space, Rohan.
No, I think this is, again, super insightful. I think AI agents, you had a launch of a system known as Anthropic launching their autocomputer kind of an agent mechanism whereby all the tasks on the computer screen have been sort of agentified. And so now when you prompt that I want to change my entries on an Excel sheet based on some PPT slides that have sort of come in or some information that may have come on an email, there's an AI agent sort of doing all of those CRUD operations to actually create that sort of a workflow. No, I think, again, super helpful and insightful. My follow-up question sort of stems from my previous question, which is, till date, we're sort of trusting AI to do a lot of our supplementary work, right? Yeah, I mean, emails maybe not that critical. It's sort of not life-changing per se, right? In case of a human, you can, they took this decision because of this, right? And the third situation is that of AI not having enough information to make that correct decision. What do you think out of these three factors are sort of we most dependent on? Is it just because, yes, I'd love to have you, Dr. Sabine, first. is it just because that we're so emotionally connected to the fact that there's another human taking that decision and that's why we're comfortable with it, despite the fact that AI might be able to perform better? That might being, again, under sort of quote unquote might.
So, God no. The third is one of the most important reasons of anyone within the industry to do it. Because as I said, that, you know, we have what, about 1.3 billion people wearing wearables globally today, of the 7 billion people we have. And even then, the data metrics that we are pulling from that are very limited. It's an RPG sensor. It basically has 4 primary data points that it's collecting. And then it's creating an algorithm to do analytics to create about 40, 45 odd different metrics on top of it. And sure, they might be accurate, but the number of primary data points that we are collecting are far too less at the moment if we are looking at a decision which is as critical as a life and death problem. Also, you spoke about robotics that are into action. Now, most of Da Vinci and others, which are mature robots in the space, they are also operated by humans on the back end, because the data points that are necessary to take each and every micro decision are far too many and not yet available. So that is the primary reason why at least someone like me would not trust a decision taken. Though there are certain use cases, as I said, pathological analysis of, say, a tumor slide, or for that matter, a CV decision of tech that has been trained on millions of data sets of CT analysis or X-ray analysis. That I would trust an AI on far more than I would trust a human on, because it's basic logic. But on this one, there isn't enough data. So the trust will come when you actually start seeing that much data being collected and assimilated from a person's perspective also, not just from a systemic perspective.
Definitely trust is the first step that will be there in the process, according to me, because AI will come in the treatment part of the process, right? But before that, a patient goes and meets a doctor. So that brings us to the second step, that who's going to be responsible. So the person suggesting the AI treatment will always be responsible, at least in a country like India, because we will go and talk to that one person. I cannot go and have a conversation with AI that, boss, why did you do this to me? So the doctor will be held responsible in a country like India. Bringing to the third point, which is about data. Now, the Indian subpopulation has a very specific, healthcare related issues or healthcare related profiles. In America, they don't even teach about tuberculosis, but in India, it's one of the main diseases that we are fighting. So, an AI model that is treated according to the Indian subpopulation healthcare data is too far away, and because the regulations in healthcare are such that research itself will require 10 to 15 years till the time an actual model comes out into the market. So for all of this to happen, we are still 10 years away. Even if the product is ready today, the regulations are such, and it's good, that it's going to take another 10 years to come. But
Absolutely.
Trust is definitely the first step.
Yes. So I think it's better to be safe than to be sorry in situations like this. And so
in life and death, you can't rely on
absolutely,
AI alone.
absolutely. So I think, again, the product may be ready, but for it to scale, for it to be tested on the demography, it needs to go through the processes that it would, because you can't sort of give it all away. Now sort of taking a tangent, but something similar along these lines. We talked about how humans are sort of emotional decision makers, right? AI may not be emotional decision makers as of yet. There's a lot of data that it is sort of crunching on. It may be giving a very definitive, clear-cut data-supported answer, but it lacks the emotional component of it. Intrinsically, one thing that I've noticed, and I like to have Mr. Shashi first sort of chip in on this question, is, when you spend 100 rupees on the counter as compared to when you pay 100 rupees via UPI, there is this emotional pain that you feel when you spend these 100 rupees by cash, right? You spend 1,000 rupees by cash, you just tap and pay 1,000 rupees by your card. There's this sort of emotional heartache that you feel in your heart that I'm spending these 1,000 rupees or these 5,000 rupees, right? Because we humans are so sort of emotionally biased by our own internal pains, at least when it comes to the finance space. In India, I mean, everyone, especially Gujaratis, are very picky and all about, ki bhai, where is this 100 rupees also going, right? But now with all of these payments actually happening online, do you think that somewhere we are losing this emotional touch of being actually being in touch with how we're operating as humans, right? It's a slightly deeper question in terms of the context of it. And so, are we dehumanizing ourselves when we are sort of digitizing, especially in the finance space?
Your question, you only touched, Rohan, on finances. Probably we are giving away much more than that for services portion. And I'll come to this very, very quickly. All of you, when you give access to your data on various apps, you don't think twice of what you're giving away, right?
Yeah.
And that's how the whole philosophy, or not philosophy, but the whole idea of social engineering and why things are happening and ads are getting served and all of it. But we take free services for that. Well, that's the value that at least we tell ourselves, right? Primarily for it. So we get ourselves engineered because we knowingly or unknowingly are doing this. But I'll come to your question, right? Whether it is money or any other aspects of it, it will always be ingrained upon how you grew up. People like me, right, who are nearing their late 40s, have lived in a world where technology was not as ubiquitous and as pervasive. So for us, physical things and physical portions and interactions and things mattered differently, and that is how ingrained, right? And that comes across. So money as a concept also is coming from there. But in today's generation, if I take of my kids or, you know, all the millennials, if they start paying through tap and plastic money and driven across, right, for them the emotional connect of money is very different. It is about convenience. It is not about the value of what you're talking about. So it is very difficult to say that we are dehumanizing. It's the whole angle of where you are staying, right? Or in which era and how you have grew up and how we're exposed to across. It is getting convenient. It is definitely getting convenient, and it will continue being more convenient because more and more needs to be pulled out of your pockets, and there should be least friction about that. But being conscious or not conscious, that's a choice that you'll have to take, because even in today's world, there are stingy people who basically take note of it and do what is drive. So in a simple nutshell, just to answer the questions, we have given ourselves out for the services and the convenience that we are taking. Now, whether you call that dehumanizing or it is just, you know, we want to keep ourselves, how do I say, lives simple and more convenient, that's the price that you are paying for what is happening, rather than dehumanizing, because these things will only continue to go more and more as we go by. Right. This friction, every technology is only trying to reduce friction, and that's how you make commerce happen, and that's not going away primarily. So that's the way I look at it.
I think, again, super helpful. Mr. Harshvardhan, would you sort of like to chip in? Are human sensitivity sort of, when it comes to at least financial spending, sort of, are we becoming less sensitive to financial spending because of digitization of finance?
Yeah, I think what I realize is I personally feel that there are three characteristics that humans have compared to a machine, right? First is intuition. I think we build that intuition, but finally we build that with a lot of data points across our upbringing and everything. I think the second important thing that differentiates us is empathy, right? Overall, because we are all living organisms, we basically have some sort of empathy for each other and everything, and that also defines and refines a lot of time on what decisions we take. And third and most important is, as much as all of us understand that our brains are the most complex AI systems available, right, overall, with billions and billions of neurons going on. I think adaptability is also a critical piece that we all have. And like in medical science, as my friend suggested over here, we still are not at that stage where all these three tasks can be very intricately done by AI overall. I think it's the same case in financial services. I think digitizing finance has been for 2-3 core purposes. One is to reduce the cost of transaction, right? Overall, I think for the longest time, we all have paid tons of fees to banks and intermediaries who charge us multiple things to transact and send money from one place to another. Second important piece was friction as well, right? I always remember that my dad used to carry almost sacks of notes in his pocket, right? Whenever he used to travel and everything, and that has now gone down, right? Even if you don't carry a purse right now, your mobile is as good as a purse for yourself overall. So I don't think, I think what's happening with every evolution is that our lives are getting easier overall, and the friction between us, transactions and everything is reducing. Emotional connect, I personally don't feel that if I'm paying 100 rupees cash or 100 rupees by a UPI, it'll change that much of a feeling for me, because finally it's 100 rupees going from my account as well. Yeah, I think what we are seeing is that, and like Shashi also suggested, that the millennials are thinking less about money compared to the previous generations. I think that is also with to the fact of access of money that they have, right? Very early in their age, I remember the first few years I had a salary while working in a job, and comparatively the starting salaries that are there right now. Furthermore, what's happening is like a lot of other developed nations, we are going across a journey of our own where single kids are there. The parents are very well settled, and the single kid then remains very well settled compared to 20, 30, 40 years ago when our parents started their journey compared to what we started, and now my son will start. So that's the difference.
Okay. So have slightly, I mean, so you personally don't feel there's an emotional detachment when you spend 100 rupees, say for example, 10,000 rupees by UPI as compared to 10,000 rupees in cash. You wouldn't feel that detachment per se.
I don't think so.
Okay. So now following up on that question is, do you think the definition of money, and I'll have Mr. Adish sort of answer that first. Do you think the definition of money is going to change over the next 5 years? When I say that, I mean that there was a very recent conclave where Mr. Jay Kotak and Elon Musk were having a conversation. And Mr. Kotak asked him, what is money according to you? And Elon Musk answered that money is just a representation of the exchange of goods and services. And that entry in a database or a ledger is what money is, essentially. There's no intrinsic value of money. But then can you sort of add functions over this money? Money not just being representation, but can I assign money to someone prior to me actually spending that? Can I be like, I'm gonna send you a 500 rupee UPI transaction right now, but you can only spend it on a petrol station. So there is now a function that is attached to that money. Do you think the definition of money over a period of time is going to change? There are going to be more functions that are going to be attached to money per se, or because now, as we're sort of entering the age of digitization of finance?
Well, I mean, Elon definitely lives in a different world. So I feel money will still remain money. And mainly AI, or I mean digitization, is just a means to improve the transfer of money. Money defines a lot of things. Money you have, money you are giving to somebody. There's a lot of definition in it. So I don't think the concept of money will change as such. Yes, it will get easier to transfer. And the second thing you just mentioned was, it might be assigned to somebody. We do that today. You check into the hotel at Leela, they block your card for 20,000 rupees, and they say, okay, you might not spend 20,000 today with us, but we'll just block it for you. So you're using a credit card today, you might just use something else. You might use a crypto, right? So the definition of money still, I mean, it has been there for hundreds of years. It will remain the same. The transfer will change.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think, and Mr. Harshvardhan, I would like to take you up on that. Do you think as money becomes software, obviously there's hard assets that are sort of backing it, but as money becomes software, like any software, you can sort of start doing complex things with it. Can you be like, again, extending on my same point, can you be like, I'm transferring this money to you, but this is assigned for a specific role, right? Can there be more functions that are attached to this sort of software money per se?
Yeah, totally. I totally agree to that fact that money will take a form of software, and all the cryptocurrencies that we see right now are typically the form of money picking up a software role, right? We have a few currencies like safe coins who have backing of maybe US currency or maybe gold or everything, but there are like other cryptos that don't have backing of a particular currency, right? I think we've seen phenomenal rise of Bitcoin, right? The reason, and Bitcoin today is the 20th largest currency globally. The reason was that it comes in a form which is very easily interchangeable, very easily transferable, and you can allocate that to different functions, use that for multiple choices and stuff like that. So I definitely agree to the fact that it can be, and I think we now are seeing special kind of contracts as well, right, which are blockchain or some other kind of contracts which typically can be associated with a particular function, and they, once the function is done, you realize the value on them. So not necessarily, so we are typically what's happening is we all started from barter, right, overall, and not necessarily money was there and was in existence always. Now these contracts and these kind of cryptos and everything will re-enter our lives as a form of money, as a form of exchange, and it will solve for us.
Very insightful. Dr. Sabine, would you sort of like to chip in? I think you have some background in the healthcare insurance space as well, right? And the way insurance is being sort of managed here in India and in the US, right? Do you think insurance, because insurance has these overlaps both in the healthcare space and the finance space, do you think there are ramifications of AI slash blockchain, AI independently, blockchain where the transfer of money is actually taking place in the healthcare insurance space per se?
So, very interesting question, because first of all, we need to look at what is insurance. Insurance is something, is a quantification of future risk, similar to what we have in terms of futures and derivatives in the financial space, but it is a much longer quantification, and the underlying asset is your own health when we look at health insurance, which is again something which is very tricky to define. So the role that AI is going to play is largely in the healthcare space, in the way, as I was mentioning, the different areas of healthcare are being automated, subsidized for cost, being more accurate, opening up access through lower and lower financial burden to the recipient of the healthcare industry. So as patients, for you it will be more accessible, it will be cheaper, more affordable, and it also will be something which is hopefully more accurate. I think that's the direction that AI and AI systems are taking the healthcare ecosystem, and because healthcare is what insurance is backed on, health insurance, again we are talking only about health insurance and life insurance here. So because it's backed on that, so of course it is going to get easier, cheaper and more affordable. Now that's one part of it. Blockchain as an industry, I believe, is also changing the nature of money as we know it, changing the nature of financial transactions as we know it, but more as of now on the back end side. And touching base with what you were speaking about in terms of trust and liability, I think that is something that from a government perspective is being looked at very differently for blockchains and other technologies and their application within the financial space. Because, I mean, trust me, I have been in the insurance space also for long enough to know that people value money far more than they value health. So we have been able to make people understand the value of health by telling them that they will be poorer for it, poorer financially for it, instead of being able to convince them on the value of their own health. So I believe that these, not just these two, but many, many emerging technologies, especially in the biotech space as well, are going to, in the next 15 odd years, change the nature of what it is to be human altogether. I mean, from the time in the early 90s to where we are today, the delta of difference, and both from a behavior of masses as well as to personal behavior, has changed so much that I am very confident that we are essentially self-evolving to be a completely different species in the next 20, 30 years. And we will see that in our own lifetime looking back. So I believe that these technologies are making a huge difference individually, but a lot of it is under the surface, and we are building ecosystems which are more and more secure, more and more accessible. I think that is where the technology is playing a huge role today, but it will come to the surface in our behavior very soon as well.
I think technology is sort of going to, again, change how human behavior generally is going to sort of change over the next couple of years. There's this sort of a huge fear of AI replacing jobs, right? And it's said that 85 million jobs would be replaced by AI by the year 2025. Already started to happen. And then there is this conversation that's happening on the other hand that while 85 million jobs may be replaced, there are going to be 97 million new jobs that are going to be created, right? New roles, new people sort of getting employed in this space. Dr. Adit, according to you, what are the new kind of roles or new kind of job designations that AI is going to create? And do you think that upskilling is now going to be a major thing for all institutions, irrespective of industries at large, that industries would have to start adopting, or they're going to be left behind?
So more than job loss, I think everyone, including the government, should be worrying about is job transition. It's important that we start to reskill or upskill our manpower to kind of transition to a job that are going to be created by AI. A lot of jobs, yes, are going to be completely replaced by AI, and a very small example is manual data entry, right? That is something that is definitely going to be, is already being replaced across the world. But with AI, any kind of AI software around the world will need to be regulated by really skilled people. By regulation, I mean to say that they need to be overseen as to what is it that the AI software is impacting the regular guy, the normal people. And these are the jobs that are going to be created with the implementation of AI across the world. So here the term reskilling is very important, and the government needs to focus on reskilling the people that are going to be replaced by AI.
So first, I'd like to have Mr. Shashi sort of give his insights on this, and then if you have, Dr. Sabine, anything to add on to this, would love to get your insights on this. Yeah.
Sure, Rohan. So jobs are going to get replaced. Yes, I think it's, as also Adit was talking about transitions, but I'll just refer to the first point which I had started off. If there are somebody who was a middleman or a layer which was helping a transaction getting done between you and a system, those kinds of jobs are definitely going to phase out primarily, right? And that can be an assistant, that can be a call center agent, that could be, you know, anybody like a teller or I don't know, between a system and the user, if there was just playing middleman role and portions. So that's the immediate thing that we are seeing, and that will get replaced. Many more jobs, portions will happen. But while, and I'll just allude to the fact that as AI becomes more prevalent and more used across the board, many more roles are going to be opening up, right? When today McKinsey and Bain consults on businesses, when new AI business models are going to be run, there will be consulting required on that. There will be people who will be needing to audit those things which is happening across. So audits and functions and checks and balances will be required. There will be people required for testing. There will be people required for human in the loop kind of transactions. There will be people required on the security side of things and downstream things which will happen. So a lot of other opportunities are open. And remember, the number of transactions are going to increase, right? The multifold story which will happen in every space. That means the number of people to oversee, from a consulting to cross-check to balances to learning to training, there will be many more parts of things which will happen. So there's definitely going to be a spawn of an ecosystem, and I think this will be adjacencies, right? Adjacency of what skills you need to develop, and that should give you people an insight into what's going to happen around here. So I don't think there will be not work, but yes, there'll definitely be changes.
Sure. Yeah. So I think Dr. Sabine would like to add in something. And post that, just to respect the time that we have in our hands, I'd like to open after Dr. Sabine sort of comments on this, I'd like to open up the floor for any potential questions that you may have for any of the speakers here.
So, food for thought on that note, as we started speaking about the nature of work, how many of you are social science students? Can you just raise your hand? Maybe very few. One of the things, see, 20 years ago, and I was way too young for anyone to ask me at that time, thankfully so. But if anyone would have asked me what would have been the right place to go to invest in a better career, better future, then the answer would have been any technical form of education, because it gives you a direct return on investment. That was 20 years ago. Today, I believe social sciences are shifting that in a big way. So and I have had the privilege to teach quite a few social science programs, and my students get placed in some of the highest paid ethics jobs. So AI ethics and other such ethical model systems to align human ethics to AI ethics are the ones that are coming up very quickly. So whether you are in a technical role or not, one of the things you guys should consider as a program is to also build a career in social sciences or learnings within that space, so that those are the areas that you can explore on going forward. And does any one of you see late night shows still, or is it an old person thing? No one sees late night shows? You do, right? Thank God. So the point is that recently Bill Maher had talked about something very funny and very interesting. So he was TiVoing, and I don't know if anyone TiVos anymore. He was trying to TiVo a football game, and it took him like one button switch to go to the previous game, while it took him 18 different screens on doing the same functionality on YouTube. And that kind of sparked an argument on, are we over engineering the nature of work? So I think that is also something as young people we should, and I'm trying to consider myself young at this point, but we should really keep that in mind as to where are we going? Are we doing something which is making things better, or just doing something? I think that is a question that needs to be repeatedly asked as we go into system building, right? Because digitization is a process. We have gone up and down, and we have had some loopholes within that, some mistakes within that. What we are doing today is very interesting, and we are going at a rapid pace in that direction. But continuously asking that question of are we making the endpoint better is going to be very important, with AI being the new advent.
Absolutely. I think I agree 100% that the alignment of AI and its ethics with so-called human values is something that is going to sort of evolve over the next 10 years. There are discussions that are happening on both floors of the argument, which is, should human ethics be the baseline for how AI should evolve? Or is human ethics also a subject to change based on the society that we live in? So I think, again, a very interesting sort of a conversation. Now I'd like to open up the floor to any sort of questions for any of the panelists that you may have. Yes, ma'am. Could we have the mic there, please, on the first row?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Hello, everyone. This is Alisha Pradhan from Bangladesh. So I'm a founder of Harnet Television, Harnet Foundation, and Harnet Fine Arts. So we have this previously discussed, the idea of having a common commission for cybersecurity and data privacy or data protection. And my question that would be to you, because India is a big player in that case, and other member countries like Bhutan, Nepal, Bangladesh, or Sri Lanka, we may not have that kind of a representation of tech giants like Google, Facebook, or YouTube. So we have been, as individual or organization, often been overlooked in terms of security breach or threat or false alarm. So we all of the member countries do have a bill protection, I mean the data protection bill. And India has its own model to deal that. So what we wanted to know, if we can piggyback on that idea and the concept that India has and sort of form a commission for all the BIMSTEC member countries, so we can have our own cybersecurity forum or a commission, so we can have the giant tech to actually, accountable for also our part of the world. So the question is, how can we utilize AI in that forum? Because you have to have the representation from each country. So BIMSTEC doesn't have its own independent forum for cyber tech. So if you can use the AI model and sort of take all of the information each country has and tailor cut a model for that. So if you can sort of share some guidelines. There are many tech people here from each country, so we all can also generate our own ideas and actually propose this, because I feel BIMSTEC will have a strong, powerful position if we can do that. Similarly, EU or other such.
Ma'am, is your question directed to a specific panelist, or is it open
so
to
unfortunately, it's to
open to
you,
all?
you can
So if
decide,
anyone would
and
like to-
any representation from the BIMSTEC would be also an ideal person to answer. Thank
Sure.
you.
So anyone who'd like to take this up on how we could sort of, as sort of ma'am has put out, the other countries that are in here, in the BIMSTEC sort of conference, you have Myanmar and Sri Lanka and all of those. How do you use AI to get all of the data from all of those countries to create a data bank per se? Is that what the question is, ma'am? And is it specific for a specific industry that you're talking about, or is it? Right, right. Right. Got it, ma'am. Yes. So I think the question has overlaps of data sovereignty, as in because the smaller countries don't have a lot of dependence on companies like YouTube, Google, all of that. So how do we make sure, or are there any policy implementations that could be done by the government of these countries at large for that to happen?
Yeah, I can maybe start on that. So we in India have a DPDP Act, which is a Data Privacy Act that has recently been launched by government. It's been on discussion for almost 24, 36 months now, where, so it's a DPDP Act where now the government has identified on what are the critical components of data for the consumer or user himself. Where does he need, where do you need consent from him? What is the consent architecture? How do you work on it and stuff like that? So these are the things that are getting formulated overall in India right now. I think we are still not at a stage where AI applications have been developed on this. I think we've been at a stage where data collection has started happening, where individual use cases, like we are in fintech, right, overall. So there is a proper framework that has been suggested that you can collect this much data, you can store this much data, and for a clearly specified consent architecture is also there on where you need consent from the customer for using that data and everything. So I think financial services, because it's a regulated industry, we have multiple regulators like Securities Exchange Board of India, RBI, Reserve Bank of India, IRDA. It's an insurance regulatory authority. I think other than in financial services, we now have a few more bodies who are basically like Internet and Mobile Association of India is one, another internet body that regulates the data and is a self-regulating organization created by permissions from government, where they design frameworks and everything. But I think we are still not exactly at the stage, and you rightfully suggested that recently I was reading articles on how EU is using AI. So they've actually started formulating and using AI for governance, for data, and for multiple such purposes. I think India, I think we are at an early stage, but frameworks are ready. But I think applications of AI, I am not exactly sure if there are too many companies right now. But like you rightfully suggested, we have all global companies, right? Facebook, Google, Meta, everything, not only serving India in financial services, like we have Google in Google Pay as well, we have Meta in through WhatsApp in financial services as well. So they are already participating, they are already formulating. In fact, one of the things that is happening is we are also thinking of launching our own central bank digital currency (CBDC), where Meta is one of the largest players, right? Overall, so Meta is participating in that. So a lot of that is happening. Uh, I'm not exactly sure on where all this data would be available, but there can be a government agency who might be able to provide them all
So
of the data.
if someone would also like to chip in terms of how these group nations of BIMSTEC could sort of bring in together that data sovereignty. I think if Mr. Shashi.
I have just a couple of thoughts, and these are not, maybe I'm just speaking out of some practical examples, right, of what we are seeing. See, controlling the big tech companies, even India is not doing that. Data of Gmail or data of Facebook, data of any of these companies don't reside in India. Those are, you have given them permissions, they are personal informations, and they are being driven across from different parts of the world. Their DCs are not here in India. So India is also not regulated. What India is basically created policies, what they have given policies is of what data sharing is required if there is an incident which happens. If you have to take down a video, if you have to knock off some of these things, and there are those instances which have been there, which is the government relationships, and you basically raise that. So that's the only thing which is happening in India for the general large services. And that can be adopted by anybody. In fact, the smallest of the nation can raise a request to some of these companies to the right channel, and those can be driven. What you should know, and this is just from an example which I can tell you, is if India, there is Google India or Facebook India, you can raise them. There is definitely a representation which a Bangladesh or a Myanmar can make to Google Asia Pacific, because the remit of that comes into Asia Pacific. That's where it happens. So some of those channels of communications have to be established through the government. So that's one. Yeah, so that's one part of it. That's consolidation, right? So somebody definitely can take that. When I come to the security part of it, and this is something which all of you can probably look at it, and whether once the policies and the guidelines have been set up in countries, what's going to happen is you will start looking at data and start creating threat vectors, which large companies do and protect their own information and data. If you decide that your data and any kind of attack which is happening in the country, and you create a model for that, because if you're talking of creating a large language model of all the threats and all the attacks which have happened in a country, and you use that to stop utilizing or other wherever the communication is happening, that's the kind of synergy that an X number of companies can start doing. Now for that will require sharing of information and sharing of data of all threats or all detection which has happened, which is possible, because those are kinds of information which happen. Today, large security companies, when they give you any kind of coverage in their antiviruses, this is information which they are gathering from across the globe. So that kind of connect, which we called as a forum or a security forum, for sure can happen. And information sharing on the kind of attacks which have happened on, whether it is state actors or non-state actors, can be shared, and people can start preparing for it. So that's a conscious thing which you can do for sure. Yeah. And models can be written, and those models can be shared and hosted within your countries to do that once the evolution happens for that. So those are the two ways that I just wanted to share. And this is not complete answer, but yes, that's the way I could look at it.
Ma'am, I hope that answers part of your question at least. I'd like to open up the floor to any more questions. Yes.
You mentioned that money becomes software. So what is the future of the cross-border payments among the BIMSTEC economies? What is the future in next 5 or 10 years?
Could you actually repeat that again?
I want to know about the future of cross-border payment among the BIMSTEC economies. As you mentioned that money becomes software, okay, on virtual currency. Thank you.
Right. So I think, yes, just to repeat the question, if money becomes software, what is the future of that in our economies at large, right? That's
Yeah.
Is it directed to a specific panelist, or is it open to
Open to panel.
yeah, the entire panel? So if someone would like to take that up.
I don't know whether I got the essence.
No, I just wanted to ask to repeat the question once.
The question is, if money becomes software,
Yeah.
right, what are the implications of that on all the countries in the BIMSTEC summit?
Right. So maybe Shashi, I'll just pitch in once. And as I mentioned, money will still remain money, but we are here looking at the currency angle also, right? So we are not going to have a common currency. It's too complicated, right? There are a lot of things involved. It's economics, it's trade, individual economic parameters of each country. So trading in a common currency, it can be Bitcoin or anything. Every reserve bank will still have their own currency form. You can't have a common monetary base, right?
No, no, no. I don't mention the common currency.
Okay.
I just want to know about the cross-border payment system among the apps in different countries. Yeah, the payment system across the BIMSTEC economies. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Maybe Shashi, you would like to take that?
I didn't understand his last part.
Can you speak a bit loudly? The speakers are towards you. We could not hear your question.
No. No, of course. So that is the future, right? In case you didn't speak about a common currency, but that's the future. In case if there is consensus built in the coming multipolar world that we are shifting towards, then that is the future of having singular currencies, at least within the regions that are highly dependent on each other socio-culturally and through trade and finance, to make sure that we have a much larger say, and that adds on to what ma'am asked earlier as well, that it would be able to have a much larger advocacy value for large multinational corporations, for large multinational government partners, and also for the people at large in their mobility of goods and trade. So I believe that as a future, if we are able to build a consensus going forward, that is what we see in the new world.
And I'll like to add, have the other speakers sort of also chip in on this, because there's a lot that is happening with the UPI space in India, right? And the UPI integrations with countries like Sri Lanka, with Bangladesh, Nepal, right? There is this interoperable exchange of money that's happening cross-border, at least between these countries. And there's a transition of that's happening in the UPI 2.0 kind of era. So does it eventually become that there are two things to it? Does it eventually become that the international transfer of money becomes very simple? You don't have to rely on apps like the Western Union for the settlement to happen 5 to 7 days from now. And second, does the rates of the exchange actually then drop in, because the commission value that is attached to it, does that drop in when something like this actually happens?
I'll let
So maybe
answer for that.
I'll answer this from my perspective. What I think is that in future, like Sabini suggested, right, a common platform is definitely the way forward. Secondly, we might not even have currency, right? Why? So I think if you look at it, right, if there's a Facebook or a Meta or a Google or anybody else, right, if there are contracts, right, and it could be Bitcoin is a contract, right? Basically that somebody's buying, somebody's selling, somebody's exchanging and everything. If those kind of common platforms are available, right, for BIMSTEC countries overall, which are globally accepted, right, then the companies like Meta or Google, anybody can come over there and start their business, because they will be able to realize value over there. That's one. Secondly, I think the digital contracts also carry a value in the sense that today, assume I'm selling shirts to you, right, and you're paying me in your country's currency, right? In future, not necessarily you can give me some contract, some value, which I might be able to realize in some other BIMSTEC country, or buy something else from some other BIMSTEC country, or maybe use that in my own country itself, right? So I think currency, it might be too early, but currency as a overall is going to lose value, right? And globally also we've seen that whatever currencies we've relied on, whether it's dollar or whether it's yuan or whether it's gold, it's of reducing value, right? Because now every country is now printing money like there's no tomorrow, right? So there's no backing up of gold or anything that's possible. So I think in future, assumption would be it could be 10, 20, 30 years, but it will be all contracts which will be globally accepted, which will be on global platforms. And I think that's where BIMSTEC countries work together on the contracts which are globally accepted, and makes all the currencies or all the exchanges of smaller nations also worthwhile. So I think that's the way forward. I hope I could answer your question.
Any more questions for the, yes. On the front, yes.
So it was really a nice conversation, all the panelists. I just had one thought that somewhere or other we agree that AI and the tools are, robotic tools also don't have the presence of mind, what we call it. Because when some questions ask about, do you mind if some robot will do your surgery or not? But what I feel is that in future we cannot say it's impossible, because I want to quote my own example, that whether AI has an emotion or not. So in Parliament, one of the our leader of opposition has criticized AI and role of India in it, and I had to speak on the reply of it. I asked the chat GPT that let me help create one shairi poem in reply to my speech, and I put some content that he speak like this, I want to add this and all that. You won't believe ChatGPT made a really great shairi poem for my reply or speech to the LOP. But with that, I was just having in my mind that in future, if someone will have that, I want to make a robot with having this kind of value, integrity, dignity, humbleness, and all those things, robot will behave like this. If someone will make a robot with arrogance and all those such kind of negative values, robot will behave like this. Or in today's economic times also, there is an article about Kanika Saxena about DeepSeek and AI machine learning. It's a really great article. I would like you all to read it. But it's very much important, don't you think, that in future AI will also, will be able to create the emotions with the help of the modernization, and we may, fail to learn that whether it is a human or some virtual thing we are dealing with, whether we are in the conversation or anything. Like right now we see some cyber fraud happening. Even in India, it has scaled up very well. But there are, at the other end, there is some human being whom police can go and arrest. In future, there may not be any kind of a human being. Do you think that it's a threat?
So, just a perspective from my side. So, you mentioned intuition, emotions, what does a human being have? Intuition, emotions, persuasiveness, negotiations, and such roles, what roles I see are, let's say, teachers in your school. Everybody here must have one teacher which they remember, who had a different way of teaching them. There can be, therapists, doctors, of course, and leaders. I mean, you gave an example of politicians. I mean, it's very difficult for any data model or AI model to exactly replace ex-leader, or a therapist, because then the human connect comes into play, the emotions, the intuition, the negotiations, the persuasion, everything comes into play, and that's, I think, still beyond a model to create exactly to replace a certain person. You can't tell the AI model to make Michael Jackson again, right? I mean, just an example, right? Or you can't, Mr. Modi is unique because of the whole experiences he got from his childhood. Very difficult for an AI model to recreate him immediately. Just a thought on my side.
Absolutely, I think. So if someone else would also like to chip in on something like this, what is the future of hyper-personalized AI and this sort of AI having, or AGI per se, or AI having these emotional connections, connects, and then representing a human form or being close to representing a human form?
So this happened to me a few days ago. I actually asked ChatGPT to write a poem for me as well. But this was for my boyfriend, and he didn't realize that it was not from me and it was from ChatGPT. So I just had to give it like 5 prompts, I believe, and it made a poem which was really relevant. And he didn't get it. So, and Now, unfortunately, the secret is out, so can't help it anymore. But the point is that in some contexts it can be hyper personalized, but the question is, what is empathy? What do you define as empathy? What do you define as harm? What do you define as behavior? That is something that's very facile, very difficult to quantify and shifting very fast. So most of the things that large LLMs are trained on are correlations that we as humans have assigned in the past or right now. They are not something that is an absolute fact. Now, when things are not an absolute fact, they can go well and they cannot go well. It can go both ways. So hyper-personalization, at least until we are able to absolutely quantify some of these things, is, I think, a hit and a miss situation.
Yeah, I'll just add to what Sabini said. See, again, all of these systems are based on data, right? Overall, so when we say whether it's AI or the earlier versions of NLPs or ML algorithms that we use and everything, like to a good question, that humility is an example, right? Humility might have, I don't know, lakhs or crores of activities. That when you see a beggar, what do you do? When you see a co-person, what do you do? When you see family members, what do you? If we are able to define those activities, if somebody starts writing them down and creates a repository of all the activities that typically would form a humility as an attribute, then you'll be able to teach AI all of that and then work on that. I think if you look at human emotions, human ideas, human thoughts and everything, right? And still like 3-4 things like empathy or intuition or adaptability, how do you teach those kind of things? So not necessarily all the behaviors might be learned today, but some of our behaviors, right? I take a classic example of US. One of the large number of deaths happen on US highways, right? To transport and everything overall. If an AI can learn within the boundaries, right, of running a truck overall on those roads, that if you reach within a certain distance of a particular object, you shut down and everything, that would save a lot of lives, right? So that not necessarily, and where a human can lack that due to sleep or whatever, the human might turn around and everything, but then AI can be beneficial. But it's still a lot of time before that kind of data is generated by us, which can be fed to them, and then they take control and start doing stuff like that.
So I hope that answers some part of your question. To
Quick
respect
question.
time, we'd have
Just
to.
one
Yes.
quick question.
Oh, sorry. We'd have to, for the respect of time, we'd have to wrap up the session right
Just
now.
a very, very short, quick question.
Sure. This will be the last question of the dais,
yes.
and then I'd also request the speakers to keep it short so that.
So as you know, we know AI and ML requires high-tech knowledge. So how can the BIMSTEC countries can collaborate for a regional AI talent pool? So in this way, we can reduce the dependency on the West for AI innovation and also prepare our youth for the AI economics. Thank you.
So great question. First of all, shared scientific talent and shared scientific rigor, something that is going to take the way forward, not just in AI, but across the board in all different deep tech areas. And on that note, we are creating multiple centers for excellence in educational institutes. And we would love to have, other countries participate. Today we are partnering with Turkey, today we are partnering with Brazil, we are partnering with several different stakeholders, and in the future would love to have more participation in building this Center for Excellence within large center of eminences, educational center of eminences, to build not just the scientific rigor and technology out of it, but also scientific talent out of it.
Shashi, would you like to add something to this?
I think she answered already. My point was also the same. Large institutions which have people from across countries, right, and learning, working together within these institutions and doing research probably is the way to go ahead and collaborate probably. And India, being the largest among these, can take the lead. So I don't see any other way of driving that motion. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
So I think we'd have to wrap up the session now. We're really thankful to everyone who's present here. If any of the audiences have any questions for any of the members, they can take it off the dais. But thank you so much for being a part of this. I'd like to thank the panelists as well for a wonderful, insightful session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rohan, and thank you all the panelists. You can all step forward for a group photograph, please. And as a mark of respect. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, once again. And ladies and gentlemen, we now move out to the breakout session 2 of the day. Just to let you know about the itinerary further, then after the breakout session, a small meeting for the presentations to be done by the delegates tomorrow, just have a word with our committee members. Then we head for the Sabarmati Ashram and Sabarmati Riverfront. Just to give you a glimpse about it, as you saw, Ahmedabad, Gujarat is not just a city or a state, it's an experience in its kind. We would like to take you all for a journey through its soul, beginning with the historic Sabarmati Ashram, the place where Mahatma Gandhi's vision of non-violence took shape. Also, we will unwind by the serene Sabarmati Riverfront, a testament to Ahmedabad's